The first shot that hit the post office window wasn't what frightened Hannah Wells, it was the fact that she wasn't surprised. Bad luck followed her like a shadow, had done so since she was 10 years old, and her parents' farmhouse burned to the ground while she slept safely at a neighbor's. Now, crouched behind an overturned desk in Fargo, North Dakota Territory, 1876, she clutched the letter that had promised her a new beginning, a husband, and an escape from what she'd come to believe was her curse. "Miss, are you hurt?" The deep voice came from the doorway where a tall man with dust-covered clothes and a sheriff's badge stood, revolver drawn. "No," Hannah managed, her voice barely audible over the continued gunfire outside, "but I believe I've brought this trouble with me." The man's eyes, blue as the Dakota sky, narrowed in confusion. "Unless you're the one who got Dylan's gang liquored up before noon, I doubt that." Hannah smoothed the wrinkled paper in her hands. "I'm Hannah Wells. I've come to marry Victor O'Malley." The man holstered his weapon and offered his hand. "Well, Miss Wells, that's quite the coincidence. I'm Victor O'Malley." Hannah felt her stomach drop. This wasn't how she had pictured meeting her future husband in the middle of a shootout, her dress covered in dust, her carefully packed trunk sitting abandoned on the station platform. She'd spent her entire savings on the train ticket from Philadelphia, answered his advertisement in the newspaper seeking a practical, God-fearing woman to share in the building of a cattle ranch and family. But she hadn't told him about the curse. "We need to move," Victor said, glancing toward the window. "My ranch is 5 miles north. Can you ride?" "Yes, but my belongings, we'll send for them. Right now, we need to get you someplace safe." The sound of hooves pounded outside as 2 more men rode up, firing into the air. "Sheriff." One of them called. "We got 2 of them cornered at the saloon," Victor cursed under his breath. "Change of plans, we're heading to my deputy's house, it's closer." He looked at Hannah, his expression softening slightly. "I'm sorry, this is your welcome to Fargo. I promise it's not usually this exciting." "You don't understand," Hannah said, gathering her skirts as she stood. "Trouble follows me, always has." Victor shook his head. "That's just bad timing, Miss Wells, come on." Hannah wanted to explain, to tell him about the 3 families who had taken her in after her parents died, each suffering terrible misfortunes afterward. About the school where she taught that burned down 2 months after she arrived. About the steamboat that sank on her journey west, forcing her to wait weeks for another passage. But gunshots outside made explanation impossible. They slipped out the back door of the post office, Victor's hand steady on her elbow as they hurried down an alley. The spring air was cool, the smell of mud and horses strong after recent rain. "Jeb lives just there," Victor pointed to a small house at the end of the street. "His wife Clara will look after you while I handle this mess." As they crossed the street, a bullet splintered wood just inches from Hannah's head. Victor pulled her down behind a water trough, his body sheltering hers. "See," Hannah whispered, "it's the curse." Victor's eyes met hers, fierce determination in them. "If you're cursed, Miss Wells, then we'll break it tonight." The words sent a strange warmth through Hannah's chest, even as she shook her head at his naivete. "You don't even know me," she said. "I know enough," he answered, checking his revolver. "I know you traveled 1,500 miles to marry a man you've never met. That takes courage." "Or desperation," Hannah replied, Victor's lips curved slightly. "A bit of both, I expect. Now, when I count to 3, we run for that door. Ready." They made it to Jeb's house without further incident. Clara, a small woman with a kind face and flour-covered hands, welcomed Hannah warmly while Victor explained the situation. "I'll be back as soon as I can," he told Hannah. "We have much to discuss." After he left, Clara set about making tea and fussing over Hannah's dusty traveling clothes. "He's a good man," she said, handing Hannah a steaming cup. "Best sheriff this town's ever had, and he'll make a fine husband. If he still wants me after I tell him everything," Hannah murmured. Clara raised an eyebrow but didn't pry. Instead, she offered Hannah fresh clothes and a place to wash up. Later that evening, Victor returned, his face grim but unharmed. "It's settled for now. Dylan's gang won't trouble us again tonight." He sat heavily at the kitchen table, accepting the coffee Clara poured him. "I've prepared the spare room for Miss Wells," Clara said, "and Jeb's gone to fetch her trunk from the station." "Thank you," Victor said, his eyes finding Hannah's. "Would you walk with me, Miss Wells? There's a garden out back, and I believe we have matters to discuss." The night air was crisp, stars brilliant in the vast Dakota sky. Hannah hugged herself, suddenly afraid. What if he sent her away once he knew the truth? I should have been there to meet you, Victor began, his voice low. I apologize for that. The trouble started early this morning. It's better that you weren't, Hannah said softly. You might have been hurt. Because of this curse you mentioned, Hannah took a deep breath. You must think I'm mad. I think you've had a difficult journey and perhaps some bad luck. He gestured to a small bench beneath an apple tree. Tell me about this curse. So Hannah did. She told him about her childhood, about the fire that claimed her parents, about the series of tragedies that followed her from home to home. She told him about the whispers that started, how people began to avoid her, how she'd fled Philadelphia after her last employer accused her of bringing ruin upon his business. Victor listened without interruption, his face thoughtful in the moonlight. When she finished, silence stretched between them. I understand if you want to dissolve our agreement, Hannah finally said. I wouldn't blame you. Victor studied her face. Do you believe you're cursed, Hannah, truly? I don't know what else to call it, he nodded slowly. My mother was Irish. She believed in curses, in the evil eye and banshees. She also believed that true curses can be broken. He reached out, his calloused fingers gently taking her hand. If you believe you're cursed, then we'll break it together, starting tonight. Hannah felt a surge of hope, quickly followed by caution. How? First, by refusing to let fear rule us. Second, by facing whatever comes together. His thumb traced circles on her palm. I wrote seeking a practical wife, a partner. Someone strong enough to face the challenges of building a life out here. From your letters, I believed you were that woman. And now I'm even more convinced. Victor's eyes were serious. This land tests people, Hannah. It takes measure of what they're made of. You've faced hardship and you're still standing. That's the kind of strength needed here. Hannah felt tears threatening. No one had ever seen her struggles as strength before. Will you still have me as your wife? She whispered. If you'll still have me as your husband, he answered. Though perhaps we should take some time to know each other before making it official. There's no rush. Relief flooded through Hannah. I would like that. Then it's settled. Victor stood, offering his hand. Tomorrow I'll take you to the ranch. It's not much yet, but it's home. As Hannah placed her hand in his, she felt something shift inside her, not the breaking of a curse, perhaps, but the first fragile bloom of hope. True to his word, Victor arrived early the next morning with a wagon for Hannah's trunk and a gentle mare for her to ride. Clara pressed a basket of food into her hands and Jeb promised to check on them in a few days. The gangs moved on, Victor explained as they left town, the morning sun warming their backs. But they've caused trouble before. They'll be back. And you'll face them again, Hannah said, not a question. Victor nodded. It's my job, but I've arranged for a deputy to cover my duties for the next week so I can help you settle in. The land opened before them as they rode, vast expanses of prairie grass swaying in the breeze. Hannah had never seen such space, such endless sky. In Philadelphia, buildings had hemmed her in, streets crowded with people, all of them too close, too vulnerable to whatever misfortune might follow her. It's beautiful, she breathed. It can be harsh too, Victor warned. Winters that freeze you to the bone, summers hot enough to wither crops, storms that come without warning. Like life, Hannah murmured. Victor glanced at her, something warming in his eyes. Exactly like life. The ranch came into view an hour later, a sturdy cabin with a newly built barn and corral. Cattle grazed in the distance, and a small garden plot showed the first green shoots of spring vegetables. It's not much compared to city living, Victor said as he helped Hannah down from her horse. It's perfect, she replied honestly. After years of boarding houses and cramped rooms, the open space felt like freedom. Victor showed her around the cabin with its 2 rooms, the barn where he kept his best horses, the creek that provided water year-round. As they walked, he spoke of his plans, expanding the herd, adding to the cabin, perhaps planting an orchard. You've accomplished so much on your own, Hannah said as they returned to the cabin. Not entirely on my own. Neighbors help when they can, and I hire hands during busy seasons. He set her trunk down in the smaller room. This will be your room until we decide otherwise. Hannah felt her cheeks warm at his consideration. Thank you. The first days fell into a rhythm. Hannah rose early to cook breakfast while Victor tended the animals. They worked side by side in the garden. shared meals at the rough-hewn table, and in the evenings, Victor read aloud from one of the few books he owned while Hannah mended clothes or worked on making the cabin more homelike. On the fourth day, a spring storm rolled in, dark clouds gathering on the horizon. Victor frowned as he watched from the doorway. "Looks like a bad one," he said. "We should bring the closest cattle into the corral." Hannah nodded, already reaching for her shawl. "I'll help." Together they worked quickly, driving the nearest portion of the herd into the safety of the corral as lightning began to flash in the distance. The wind picked up, bending the prairie grass flat and whipping Hannah's skirts around her legs. "That's all we can manage," Victor called over the rising wind. "The rest will have to weather it where they are." They made it back to the cabin just as the first heavy drops began to fall. Within minutes, rain was lashing the windows and thunder shook the sturdy logs. "I'm sorry," Hannah said, wringing water from her hair. "This is my fault." Victor paused in the act of lighting a lamp. "The storm, the curse, I told you." To her surprise, he laughed. "Hannah Wells, if you can control the weather, you're not cursed, you're blessed with power beyond imagining." "You don't understand. I understand that storms happen. They happened before you arrived, and they'll happen long after we're both gone." He lit the lamp, its warm glow filling the cabin. "This isn't a curse. This is life on the frontier." Hannah wanted to believe him. But as the storm intensified, a terrible cracking sound came from outside, followed by a crash that shook the cabin. Victor grabbed a rain slicker. "Stay here." "No," Hannah insisted, following him. "I'm coming with you." The rain was blinding, the wind nearly strong enough to knock them off their feet. By the light of the lantern, they could see that a massive cottonwood had fallen, crushing one corner of the barn roof. "The horses," Hannah gasped. They struggled through the mud to the barn door. Inside, the horses whinnied in panic, but all were unharmed, huddled in the far corner away from the damaged roof. "We need to secure that section before the whole thing comes down," Victor shouted over the storm. For the next hour, they worked side by side, Victor cutting away damaged beams while Hannah held the lantern and handed him tools. Rain poured through the broken roof, soaking them both, but they managed to brace the damaged section with spare lumber. By the time they returned to the cabin, they were exhausted, drenched, and covered in mud. Victor built up the fire while Hannah found dry clothes. "See," Hannah said when they were finally warm and dry, sitting before the fire with mugs of hot coffee. "The curse strikes again." Victor shook his head. "The barn is still standing, the horses are unharmed, we're safe." He reached for her hand. "This isn't a curse, Hannah, it's just life." "But no," his voice was firm but gentle, "I don't believe in curses, I believe in facing challenges, and we faced this one together." Hannah wanted to argue, but the warmth of his hand around hers and the steady look in his eyes made her hesitate. What if he was right? What if all these years, she'd been seeing patterns where there were only the normal hardships of life? The storm raged through the night, but the barn held. In the morning, they surveyed the damage in clear light, a section of roof to repair, but nothing that couldn't be fixed with a few days' work. "We were lucky," Victor said. Hannah looked at him in surprise. "Lucky? That tree could have hit the cabin instead. We could have lost animals." He squeezed her shoulder. "Instead, we have some work ahead of us, but we're all safe." Over the next days, as they repaired the barn, Hannah found herself watching Victor closely. His calm confidence, his matter-of-fact approach to setbacks, began to shift something inside her. When a repair went wrong and they had to start over, he simply shrugged and said, "That's how we learn." When one of the calves fell ill, he stayed up all night tending it, refusing to give up until it recovered. A week after the storm, Victor's deputy Jeb rode out to the ranch with news and mail. "Gang's been spotted near Bismarck," he told Victor as they sat at the kitchen table. "Seems they're moving west." "Good," Victor said. "Let them be someone else's problem for a while." Hannah poured coffee for them both, listening as they discussed town business. It struck her that in the week she'd been at the ranch, she'd begun to feel part of something, connected to this place and to Victor in a way she hadn't expected so soon. Later, after Jeb had gone, Victor handed her a letter that had arrived on the morning stage. "From Philadelphia," he said. Hannah opened it with trembling fingers. It was from Mrs. Gardner, the woman who had taken her in after her last position ended so disastrously. The letter was brief but shocking. Mr. Thompson, her former employer who had accused her of bringing misfortune, had been arrested for embezzlement. His business troubles had been of his own making all along. Bad news? Victor asked, noting her expression. No, Hannah said slowly, just unexpected. She handed him the letter. After reading it, Victor looked up, his eyes thoughtful. Seems your curse might have been protecting you, not following you. Hannah had never considered this perspective. What do you mean? This man blamed you for his own misdeeds. Perhaps the other misfortunes you witnessed were similar, not caused by you, but revealing truths that others wanted hidden. The idea was startling, revolutionary. Hannah sat heavily in a chair, her mind racing back through each incident of her so-called curse. The fire that killed her parents, later determined to be arson by a business rival. The family that lost their fortune after taking her in rumors had circulated even then about the father's gambling. The school fire caused by the caretaker's carelessness with lamp oil. I never thought of it that way, she whispered. Victor knelt beside her chair. Hannah, whatever happened in your past, you're here now, with me, and I don't believe for a moment that you bring misfortune. For the first time since she was a child, Hannah felt the weight of the curse lifting. Not broken, as Victor had promised that first night, but re-examined, understood differently. Thank you, she said, her voice thick with emotion, for believing in me when I couldn't believe in myself. His hand came up to cup her cheek. I've been watching you this week, your strength, your determination, your kindness. I know we agreed to take time to know each other, but I find myself already certain. His eyes held hers. I want you as my wife, Hannah Wells, curse or no curse. Hannah's heart pounded. She'd come to marry a stranger, a man who existed only in letters. But the Victor O'Malley before her was real, solid, and in just 1 week had shown her more understanding and partnership than she'd known in her entire life. Yes, she whispered. I want that too. Their first kiss was gentle, a promise of more to come. When they parted, Victor's smile was like sunrise. Then we'll ride to town tomorrow, he said. Find the preacher. That night, as Hannah prepared for bed in her small room, she realized she no longer felt the shadow of the curse hanging over her. Instead, she felt possibility stretching before her like the vast Dakota prairie wild, sometimes dangerous but beautiful in its freedom. The next morning dawned clear and bright. They rode to town side by side, Hannah wearing her best dress, Victor in clean clothes with his hair slicked back. The preacher, a kindly old man named Reverend Daniels, agreed to perform the ceremony that afternoon. We'll need witnesses, he said. I'll find Jeb and Clara, Victor replied. While Victor went to locate his friends, Hannah wandered to the small general store to purchase ribbon for her hair. As she was paying, gunshots erupted outside. Get down, the shopkeeper shouted, diving behind the counter. Hannah dropped to the floor, heart pounding. Through the window, she could see men on horseback. Dylan's gang returned. Terror gripped her, not for herself but for Victor. Had they returned seeking revenge against the sheriff who had driven them away? Crawling to the door, Hannah peered outside. Victor stood in the middle of the street, revolver drawn, facing 3 mounted men. Jeb was beside him, shotgun ready. You're not welcome in Fargo, Victor called out. Ride on. The leader, a man with a scarred face, laughed. We got unfinished business, Sheriff. You cost us a good haul last time. And I'll cost you more if you don't leave now. Victor's voice was steady, unafraid. Hannah's old fear surfaced. This was the curse, returning just when she'd begun to believe it might be broken. She'd brought this danger to Victor, to this town. But then she remembered his words. If you believe you're cursed, then we'll break it together. Making a decision, Hannah pushed the door open and stepped into the street. Hannah, get back inside, Victor called, not taking his eyes off the gang. Instead, Hannah walked forward until she stood beside him. No, we face this together, the scarred man's eyes narrowed. Who's this, your woman? My future wife, Victor said, a note of pride in his voice despite the danger. And she's right, you're facing both of us now. Other townspeople emerged from buildings, the blacksmith with his hammer, the barber with a shotgun, women with rifles. Slowly, they gathered behind Victor and Hannah, a united front against the intruders. The leader looked around, calculation in his eyes as he counted the growing opposition. Seems you've got friends, Sheriff. More than you, Victor agreed. Now ride out and don't come back. For a tense moment, Hannah thought the men would open fire. But faced with the determined resistance of the entire town, the leader finally spat into the dirt. This ain't over, he growled, wheeling his horse around. Yes, Victor called after him, it is. They watched as the gang rode away, dust rising behind them. Only when they disappeared from sight did Hannah realize she'd been holding her breath. Victor turned to her, his expression a mixture of admiration and concern. That was brave and foolish. It was necessary, Hannah replied. You said we'd face challenges together. I meant to keep that promise. A slow smile spread across his face. So you did. He looked around at the townspeople. Thank you, all of you. The crowd dispersed, some clapping Victor on the back, others nodding respectfully to Hannah. Clara appeared, taking Hannah's arm. Come along, she said. Can't have you getting married covered in dust. The ceremony was simple but meaningful. In the small church, with sunlight streaming through plain glass windows, Hannah and Victor exchanged vows before Reverend Daniels. Jeb and Clara stood as witnesses, along with a dozen townspeople who had heard the news and gathered to see their sheriff married. I promise to stand beside you through whatever comes, Victor said, his voice clear and steady. To face each day together in hardship and in joy. Hannah's voice trembled only slightly as she repeated similar words, adding, I promise to believe in our future, not fear it. When the Reverend pronounced them husband and wife, Victor's kiss was both tender and full of promise. The small congregation cheered, and for the first time in her life, Hannah felt truly accepted, part of a community. After a small celebration at the town's hotel, the closest thing Fargo had to a proper restaurant, they rode home together as the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the prairie. Mrs. O'Malley, Victor said as they approached the ranch, testing the name. Hannah smiled. I like the sound of that. That night, in the cabin that was now truly their home, they came together as husband and wife. Victor's touch was gentle yet sure, his eyes never leaving hers as they discovered each other. Hannah, who had spent so many years afraid of connection, found herself opening like a flower to the sun, giving and receiving love without reservation or fear. Afterward, lying in his arms, she traced the outline of his face in the moonlight that spilled through the window. I think you were right, she whispered. About what? About breaking the curse, she smiled. I don't feel it anymore, Victor pulled her closer. It was never about breaking anything, Hannah. It was about building something stronger, something a curse couldn't touch even if it were real. As summer bloomed across the prairie, Hannah and Victor settled into life as a married couple. The ranch flourished under their joint care, Victor expanding the herd while Hannah established a thriving vegetable garden and began keeping chickens. Together they completed the barn repairs and added a room to the cabin. Word came that Dylan's gang had been captured in Montana territory after a failed bank robbery. The threat they had posed was finally gone, allowing Victor to focus more on ranching than on his sheriff duties, though he continued to ride into town weekly to check on things. In late summer, Hannah discovered she was expecting a child. When she told Victor, his joy was boundless. He lifted her in his arms, spinning her around the kitchen. Careful, she laughed. I'm delicate now. You are the strongest woman I know, he countered, setting her down gently, and you'll be the finest mother. As her body changed with the growing child, Hannah sometimes caught herself waiting for disaster, the old habit of expecting the curse to manifest. But each time, she would remember Victor's words from that first night. If you believe you're cursed, then we'll break it tonight. And somehow, through his steady belief in her, in them, the curse had indeed been broken. Winter came early that year, blanketing the prairie in snow before November ended. Victor added extra insulation to the cabin walls and kept the fireplace well stocked with wood. Hannah, now showing her pregnancy clearly, sewed baby clothes and quilts as the wind howled outside. One bitterly cold evening, as they sat before the fire, Victor placed his hand on her rounded belly, feeling the child move beneath his palm. I've been thinking, he said. If it's a girl, perhaps we could name her Hope. Hannah covered his hand with hers. Hope O'Malley. She tested the name, feeling its rightness. And if it's a boy, Victor considered. What was your father's name? James, Hannah said softly. Then James it is. Hannah leaned against him, overwhelmed by how far she had come from that frightened woman who arrived in Fargo believing herself cursed. I never imagined I could be this happy, she admitted. I was so certain I was meant for loneliness. We make our own fate, Victor said, kissing her forehead. One day at a time, one choice at a time. In February, during a rare mild day when the sun turned the snow-covered prairie blindingly white, Hannah went into labor. Victor rode for the midwife, Mrs. Peterson, who arrived just in time to help deliver a healthy baby girl with a shock of dark hair and eyes as blue as her father's. "Hope," Hannah whispered when Victor placed the swaddled infant in her arms. "Our hope." Victor sat beside her on the bed, one arm around Hannah's shoulders, the other hand gently touching his daughter's tiny face. "She's perfect." "She is," Hannah agreed, then looked up at him. "And she's not cursed," Victor smiled. "No, she's blessed. With a mother who survived enough hardship to appreciate joy when it comes. With a father who will move heaven and earth to protect her. And with a home built on love and trust." As spring returned to the prairie, bringing new calves to the herd and fresh green shoots to the garden, Hannah often stood on the cabin porch with hope in her arms, watching Victor work with the cattle. She would remember the frightened woman who had arrived in Fargo a year ago, convinced she carried misfortune with her wherever she went. That woman was gone now, replaced by Hannah O'Malley, wife, mother, rancher's partner. The curse that had shadowed her for so long had been revealed for what it truly was. A story she told herself to explain a world that sometimes dealt harsh blows without reason. Victor had shown her another story, one where hardships were faced together, where joy was possible even after sorrow, where love built something stronger than fear. On their first anniversary, Victor presented her with a locket containing a tiny portrait of hope. "To remind you," he said as he fastened it around her neck, "that curses can become blessings when you have the courage to face them." Hannah touched the locket, then reached up to kiss him. "I don't need reminding anymore," she whispered against his lips, "but I'll treasure it all the same." That night, as they lay together in the quiet darkness, Hope sleeping peacefully in her cradle nearby, Hannah felt the completeness of the journey she had made from a cursed girl to a blessed woman, from fear to love, from loneliness to family. "Victor," she murmured, her head on his chest where she could hear the steady beat of his heart. Thank you for breaking the curse." He stroked her hair. "You broke it yourself, Hannah. I just reminded you that you could." She smiled in the darkness. Perhaps they were both right. Perhaps the curse had been broken that very first night in Fargo, when a frightened mail-order bride and a determined cowboy had decided to face whatever came, not separately, but together. Outside their window, the vast Dakota sky stretched endlessly, stars scattered like diamonds across its darkness. Tomorrow would bring its own challenges, it always did in this wild land. But Hannah O'Malley no longer feared what might come. Whatever the future held, they would meet it side by side, turning curses into blessings one day at a time.